Hi. By far, one of the most frequently requested videos I do is on the topic of romance advice. I've always been kind of hesitant about getting any kind of advice for romance. For one, like a lot of other INTJs, I don't think I'm the best. I shouldn't be in a position giving anyone advice on the subject. That being said, I'm not above trying something I'm not good at. I'll take a stab at anything. But I'm going to approach it more from a perspective as giving advice to someone like myself, a younger version of myself. And hopefully this will help. Now, it makes sense why INTJs were one advice, because you may have taken the test and it seemed like it fit you very well, knew your personality to the T, except when you look for romantic advice in these tests you've taken, they don't really give you much of anything to go on. And on top of that, when you watch videos on YouTube about how to date and romantic advice in general, it doesn't seem like it answers the questions that need to be answered. The main reason that is us INTJs, we tend to be very different than other types. So advice for us tends to be not what we need to hear. So that's why I'm trying to make this video for everyone. Advice for INTJs specifically, from an INTJ myself. A lot of this stuff isn't going to be super radical. I'm just going to serve it to you in a way that's a little more digestible than what you might get from other video sources or websites. And of it, it's going to be a little more unique. As with a lot of things on this channel, I'm going to focus on the Myers-Briggs MBTI and use it as a template to work off of. A little disclaimer, I'm not an expert in the subject, so as an INTJ, I have a way of saying things as if they're fact. And I don't want to dissuade you from that. Although I will sound like I'm certain about these things, I'm not. Go and explore these things yourself. But these are my views on it. So hopefully you can take them and be useful to yourself in your life. But starting, I think I'd use the example. One of my favorite stories earliest was the Plato's Symposium story from his earlier works. In it, Socrates and Plato get invited to a meeting that's supposed to celebrate a great poet who wrote a love story, and they all kind of shift around and they shift places because they don't want to go first. And Aristophanes, one of the writers at the time, really known for kind of being a gadfly, and not really a gadfly, but poking fun at Socrates. So he's pretty interesting, but he had a very good analogy for love. And what his is that in early pre-human history, a man and woman were together like a ball, and we would have the strength of multiple people in this ball, and we'd bounce around and be very powerful. So much so, we posed a threat to Olympus and Zeus. And Zeus, seeing this threat, split us in half, man and woman. And this is a good metaphor because it tells you what love is like. It's two things. Is that when you're in love, you feel whole, and when you're separate, it's like you have a gaping wound. So as I go on and make mentions of books, in the video description, I'll try to put book descriptions that I think are good books that I've read or recommend, and they'll be in there, of course. So don't try to write these down as we go. They'll be in the video description for you. But so why do INTJs have the hardest time with dating? I was just using the Myers-Briggs as an example. You take the opposite of our letter, INTJ, is an ESFP, and they have the easiest time of dating. And you always wonder why that is, and it's not just because they're simple. You might jump and say that, but I think every little letter in our description makes it hard to date, and that's why we tend to have the hardest time at dating. And we have to really grow our, not just rely on our strengths, but grow our weaknesses, what Jung would call shadow work. So I'm going to use that as a template in the beginning of this video, and touch on all those letters, why it makes it harder to date, and what you can do to kind of make it easier for you. And this is what I've learned. So the first letter, introversion, that kind of goes without saying. I think a lot of people would probably pick that as one of the easier ones to point to figure out why INTJs have it the hardest, and I would agree. So things that would work at making you more extroverted, and people say, I get pushback when I tell people this, we have to strengthen your weaknesses instead of relying on your strengths. They say, oh, I don't, it means I don't have to be, I gotta be something other than an INTJ. Well, it's like, no, you don't have to change who you are. But instead of focusing on your strengths, you'll get a lot more return on your investment. You'll get diminishing returns on making yourself more what you are instead of balancing your weaknesses. In regards of introversion, your social circles tend to be smaller, so you just plain know fewer people. Me, myself included. That's the problem. Is like I think I'm pretty good catch, but people in my circle, I just don't know anyone who's freaking single, and you may experience that as well. So some of the best things you can do is take acts that increase your social circle. And one thing is I like to call it, first thing that I learned is called be a yes man. So if someone asks you to do something, you just say yes. By that I mean if they invite you to do something with them, you say yes. Now, to me, anything being extroverted, anything being social, I have this repulsion to do it, and revulsion, I just do not want to do it. But you find yourself just say yes, knowing that you're going to hate it, and like going to a party, for example. Just say yes. And you go, and you just realize if you don't like it, you always can find a way out. But you commit to doing it. And I've gotten to so many interesting things and met so many interesting people just by doing that in itself, and not to mention more than a few girlfriends. So that's one great way of increasing your social circle, at least in my opinion, is when someone asks you to say something, you say yes. Another thing I would say as far as introversion to counter that is to do activities that have you interact with people. So when you have something you want to do, is like with me, the things I like to do, I like to go to the gym and work out and lift weights and jog. But those things you do, they're very solitary. They don't have things you do with people. And let's say you go to a concert, to a movie, you're doing it with lots of people, but social interaction is not built into the mechanism. So try to find activities, ones you really like a whole lot, find ones you're okay with, but they have more interaction. One of the best ones I found was dancing, actually, because that is built into it, the social interaction. And the same thing as like taking a college class, for example. Yeah, that's the problem with us INTJs. All the classes we take, they tend to be very solitary, like math and engineering, the sciences, but they don't really encourage interaction. A lot of ways I make new friends, it's like either a foreign language, public speaking, or an acting class, because the social interaction is built into it. So you don't have to try. People will be talking to each other while you're there. So that helps a whole lot. Instead of trying to go to a movie theater and starting a conversation with someone, that's really hard. It can be done, but it's stacked against you. But if you're at an acting class, for example, you're going to have a skit or a minor segment of a play that you can talk to someone, and you're automatically interacting with them. It makes it so much easier. And I think another thing is, let's see what else. Generally, it's just more about making friends as opposed to finding a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Just making more friends, because if you find someone you're interested in, it may not be them, or it could be a friend of theirs that has someone you meet. So it's really going to keep an open mind, more of building friend circles, social circles. What else? Sometimes, you have to start your own events too, and that's when you know a few friends, interact with them a lot. You can start your own events. Like what I like to do, have watch parties. I invite friends over. We all go to the same movie together, or we go to a bar together, and it's a kind of a tit for tat with social interactions. This is some of you more extroverted types out there. This may become obvious to you, but it's a social interaction. They invite you, and you invite them, and back and forth. So if they invite you to something, you invite them to something. Or sometimes if you invite them to your event, it's kind of puts them in your debt, or they should repay it. So that's how you start to build those social circles that way. Just with friends, but just everyone in general. But hopefully you'll find people you want to hang out with. And there's plenty of people out there. That's why if you keep an open mind and people ask you, be a yes man, when people ask you to go do things, you say yes, you'll find new people that maybe if you go to a party, 99% of the people there are going to suck, but maybe that 1% is going to be really cool, and it's more about trying to find those people instead of avoiding those social interactions. Good luck to you. It's not easy, but it's worth doing. That's the unfortunate thing about being introverted, at least in American society, as the onus is on the guy usually. I hate to be, I don't want to talk about gender in this, because at the moment I say it's hard for guys, other women will say no, it's not, but it is harder for guys if you're introverted because the onus is on you, at least in American society, to start the conversation, to go and talk, to initiate things. And unfortunately, even if you don't like to do that, you're going to have to learn to do it and practice it. But and that's where something like what they call a cold approach comes in. Now you can see a pretty girl and you just go walk up and talk to her. It's really hard, but you can do it. But it's easier just to warm up to it and develop it as a skill and practice it on a safe environment or safe person. So instead of seeing someone you're attracted to, immediately going up and talking to them, instead just talk to someone you're not attracted to, or just talk to a guy, or talk to an older woman you would never date, and practice how do you say hello, how do you start a conversation, and it makes it a lot easier instead of going to all that pressure to talk to someone you're attracted to. So you start to build up that familiarity with just doing cold approaches to people. And depending on where you live in the country, at least in the United States, I can't really comment on other parts of the world, but in the United States, different parts of the country are a little more open to talking to people. I found that larger metropolitan areas are more open for strangers just to start conversations. I live in the Midwest, so they're more standoffish. It's a little harder, but it can be done. But yeah. Well, sometimes when I talk about this kind of things to my friends, the first thing they object to is they don't want to look creepy. And I get that. And the word creepy is kind of thrown around very loosely these days. And anytime you're not just like everyone else, they say, oh, he's creepy. But I think the best description of someone who's creepy is someone who's making someone uncomfortable and doesn't care. So as long as you're at least considerate of if they're feeling uncomfortable, even though if you're doing the wrong thing, it's going to come across a lot differently. So don't let being afraid of being creepy dissuade you from kind of going up and talking to people and acknowledging them. But I'm looking at my notes here. But another thing too, when you talk to people, if you're introverted, I think one thing is myself, I do this a lot, and INTJs do this a lot, is they try to keep our cards close to our chest. And you don't want to do that when you're talking to people, because when someone comes up and when you go up and talk to someone, what they're trying to do two things. They're trying to determine what do you bring to the table, and are you harmful to them? And that's where if you're holding your cards close to your table and not really opening up and telling them and being honest and sincere or being like a robot, it's going to unnerve them. And they're probably going to paint that blank canvas with a negative caricature of you. And you don't want that. So you want to be more open. And ideally, you want to be vulnerable. So if you go to a party, for example, you feel awkward, you don't know anyone, you go walk up to someone. Better yet, don't walk up to a hot chick or someone you're really attracted to. Just walk up to a guy and make friends with the guy right then and there. And you say, I feel awkward. I don't know anyone here. How are you doing? Do you know anyone? And that automatically lets them know where you're coming from, what you offer. The vulnerability gives him opportunity. If he wants to help you, he can. And you already got rapport. Then now it's no longer just you talking to everyone. It's you and your new friend. And it makes it look so much better if you're with someone else there instead of by yourself. If you already brought a friend to the party, I guess you're already set. But yeah, so being vulnerable is a very useful technique. Well, not technique, it makes it sound cold and methodical. But hiding your weaknesses and your insecurities, it doesn't always do you favors. So, and like in Hollywood, they do this sometimes. They call, if something happens let's say you really need a key to open the door, and you open a box, and voila, there's the key to open the door. And what they do in Hollywood is they call hanging a lantern on it. So you find this key to open the door, you say, what a coincidence, this key's in there. That was odd. And just imagine the fact that you acknowledge it makes it so much more easy to digest, even if the audience knows it's kind of unusual. Same thing when you talk to people. So when you talk to them, if you walk up to, it's a cold approach and you don't know them, you can kind of just announce, I know this is weird, me coming up talking to you, or I know this is weird, you don't really know me, but I need to talk to someone here and you seem like really interesting. Something like that. So that helps to get that going. And yeah, and thing is, it's going to require practice. But I think of all the skills that INTJs probably can, the ones I know that tend to work on the most tend to be introversion. They learn how to compensate for those weaknesses. The other ones, not so much. So the next letter, intuition, how that affects dating. Now, definitely do not try to change this. In fact, it's probably a very endearing thing to a prospective partner, because intuition is one of those things you can't really change. Usually intuitive types like other intuitive types, and sensing types like other sensing types. Carl Jung mentions that a lot, but it's like one of those things you just can't affect. It's just what you're born with. To put things simply, I made a video on it where I dive really deep into it. If you're interested, you can find it in my channel or whatever. But simply put, we don't want to change it, but I want you to be conscious of how it affects you as a dating, and you can also look for other people that you date. But ideally, yeah, I mean, it's a strength, not weakness. But I think how intuition shows itself, how it makes it harder to date. And it's funny because I know extroverted, emotional people, but they're intuitive, so they have a harder time dating. They come all across as freaking weird. God bless them, I love them, but it's funny because it's not just because they're introverted or extroverted, it's the intuition. And what intuition is, in this instance, is you're not going to know how to flirt. And the ritualistic side of dating, you're just not going to get. S-types will get it. Won't ask questions. They'll just, okay, I'll do that, and they'll have no problems. They'll know what to say, what to do, and it'll be normal. But us, on the other hand, are intuitive types. We're not going to do it naturally. So what is flirting? Let's just describe what flirting is, because a lot of people just skip over it. What is flirting? It's simply showing interest in someone without risking anything. And someone is illogical, you may not understand it, but it's, if you're INTJs, for example, you'd be like, oh, that person's attractive. You walk up to them, I find you attractive. We would be a good match. Let's go date. Most people would be put off by that because it's, for one, it's not, the ritual is kind of foregone, and you want to be able to show interest without risking anything. And you can watch lots of videos about how to flirt, but I mean, I think INTJs kind of like want to know why people flirt. And as far as I can understand, it's kind of like, or the societies we evolved in, talking about small societies of thousands of people, hunter-gatherer tribes. If you went up to someone in your tribe and they rejected you, they ever want to know what your value is. And if same thing as if you go talk to a prospective mate and you reject them, everybody knows that you are no longer, that person's no longer in the same order. The value is established. And people don't like to describe dating that way, but it helps help communicate, talking about market value, like a business transaction, because it puts things more plainly. So use an analogy. Flirting is kind of like you want to go to a store and you want to buy a really nice watch. And you go to buy it and you go to ring it up and use your credit card and it says declined. The cashier knows you're broke. The person behind you knows you're broke. Everyone knows you're broke. They know you're not good enough for that watch. A better way is, if you're interested in the watch, you go up to the salesman and say, "Oh, that's a nice watch." "Oh, thank you. How much is it?" Not how much does it go for? But I mean, what kind of person would that look good on? I mean, I would think that kind of watch would be great. Anyone would look good with that watch. So I'm showing interest, but not actually saying, yes, I want that watch. So the same thing with your flirt with people. It's a way of showing interest in someone without actually coming out and saying it. So, for example, if you see someone attractive, you can go up to her or the other person and you say, I think anyone would be happy to be with you. Or you'd make a really good girlfriend. And if they acknowledge, like, thanks, or whatever, they may not be interested in, but if they say, yeah, I think you would be great too, or that really means a lot, you can test more things out and try to flirt in that way. But one thing I also found about flirting in general is, they've studied this, is women know how women flirt and guys know how guys flirt, but we don't know how the opposite sex flirts. We are both clueless. Women are clueless about how guys flirt, and guys are clueless about how women flirt. So one of the best things you could do is have a female friend with you, or an opposite gender friend with you, as your mentor, and say, oh yeah, that girl likes you. How? because the opposite gender is usually oblivious how the other one flirts. And you can kind of analyze, and I'll mention a little bit in the videos how, at least how women flirt. At least what I've read, and also you can kind of instill these flirts so they know that you're interested. A lot of times too, it's just like a fire. Once you show a little bit of interest, it sparks interest in them, then it starts to bloom from there, instead of just being passive and hard to read. But if you're open up and show interest, you don't have to always say, I think you're wonderful. You can just flirt with them with body language and have things you say. And intuition and sensing falls in the realm of body language, how you hold yourself, the little things you do. And there's lots of little ways you can use body language to show interest. I'm sure there are lots of videos on YouTube about that you can dig more into, but I'll touch on the subject briefly because I'm really interested in it. But probably because I never understood it. I had to kind of deconstruct it. But so body language, one of the first things is eye contact. And for one, I mean, if you find someone attractive, you're going to look at them more. And that's what they've shown in studies is, if somebody is, even if it's a flower, you're going to spend more time looking at it as opposed to something that's unappealing, like a rock. So if someone pretty walks into the room, you're going to spend 2.5 seconds looking at them. If someone unattractive walks into the room, you're going to spend 0.5 seconds looking at them. So that's one indication. It's really hard because you're not going to have a stopwatch. You're not going to be able to compare it. But usually eye contact for duration is going to be an indicator if someone's attracted to you. Also, I think people more open with eye contact from a greater distance. Part of that, I think, is they feel more protected, or even inside of a car, for example, because they feel like their own little bubble. But I've noticed that too. You walk in a room, someone 20 yards away, they'll make the eye contact or look at you, and you look back, and boom, that's how you can know. It makes it a little easier doing cold approaches if they know you're already into them, or they're already into you. Usually, yeah, they lock eyes, and also how you break contact is an indicator. So if I go like this, I'm probably just bored. Go like this, I'm kind of, you're too good for me, or wow. If I do this, I'm just kind of repelled by you. And you can experiment with people if you want. Never tell people about the body language if you can help it, because it kind of makes them self-conscious and it ruins it. But if you try talking to them, you can try just taking your eyes, your talk, and go up here and back down to their eyes and back to their forehead, and it'll make them feel uncomfortable, because it's a very assertive, you're not much to me kind of thing. But if you talk to them, as you talk to them, you look at their lips briefly. It usually is a more evocative look. And if you just, you're probably not worth my time. So it's a negative or a positive, negative disinterest. So if you walk into a room, someone's checking you out, and they go like that, it's an indicator. It's very subtle, but it's not that subtle. It's actually pretty easy to see. One thing that's really subtle is pupil dilation. So you get the iris, the color around the eye, the black pupil. So when you see it's automatic. When you see something you like, your eyes will go like in the cartoons. That's what they're doing in the cartoons, is they're excited and they say aruga, eyes get big, but it's the iris. So if you see a picture of an attractive woman or an exciting car or anything that you like, your eyes are automatically boom. It's automatic. You cannot control that. So much so when poker players are playing poker, these are guys with the best poker faces in the world. They win a hand just like this. But if they get a good hand, you can see it. And that's why they wear sunglasses or hats to hide it, because they know they cannot fake it. They cannot force it. And if you're unattracted to something, if it's something you don't like, your eyes will shrink. That's also why romantic dinners are done in candlelight or lower light, because your eyes will grow bigger and it makes you look more attractive. You can't fake it, but you can know to look for it. That's also why police officers, they do the flashlight thing, because if you're on drugs, your eyes should automatically, your pupils will dilate, and if they don't, you're probably on something. That's something you can't control. So it's really rare when you have a definitive body language thing, because a lot of the body language stuff is more interpretive, and you take lots of signals at once. If you guys are interested in body language, I can do a video on that specifically, but I'll put some books in there. There's lots of YouTube videos you can watch about it. Another thing is, like, when someone is looking for a partner. You can tell if they're single too. If they're at a bar or a social situation, and they're looking at everyone who comes in the room. I found that usually people that are happy in their relationship, they have no ideas. They'll look, but who's that? But if they are unhappy in a relationship, or if they're single and they're looking, they're literally looking. They're seeing who's in, they size them up, and it's something like that. So that's one indicator, I think. One thing that females, women, I use the science term because I'm an INTJ, but one thing women do, how they flirt is a lot of times usually they're in your field of vision. If they're very introverted, for example, extroverts, you'll know. You don't have to beat around the bush. But introverted women, if they flirt, a lot of times I'm assuming you're a dude. Sorry if you're not a dude. But I'm doing it if it's an advice for my younger self. Sorry if this doesn't work. Well, hopefully you can learn something from it. But how women flirt is usually they'll end up in your line of sight. So if you're at a party or social engagement, if you've done increase your social circles, for example, but if you're in some kind of situation and the woman tends to be in your view, and you come over here and then they move and they're talking to this person, usually that's because they want you to look at them, and sometimes they do make eye contact. You can tell that way. Also, they'll be in your group of friends. So if you're talking to 4 or 5 people, they'll come inside your group and talk to someone else in your group, usually within your range of view. So if you're talking to Sarah right here, and then Jen comes and talks to Bob, and she's like right here, that can be an indicator too. I had one girl did that. She was introverted. That was her way of showing she was interested. But it's really it's just more how the gender differences. Guys are oblivious to how women flirt, and women are oblivious to how guys flirt. But that's another thing too, that it's when we see this a lot, how women show flirting. I'll look really effeminate when I do this, but like how women will flirt is they'll play with the hair. Everybody knows that. Or they'll see you looking at them, they'll adjust your clothes, sit up straight, that kind of thing. Or the play with the hair thing is a big one. But a good indicator of body language if someone's interested in you is palms, where their palms face when you talk. Usually when you talk like this, it's positive. I'm a friend versus I'm an enemy. So hi, I don't have a weapon, or go what to go do with yourself. And you'll see that in a woman's body language, even when she goes to touch her face or touch her clothes, and plays with her hair, and you go like that. And I do that too, and you can do these indicators to let people know you're interested in them. They're talking to you, just do this. It's one thing to ingratiate yourself to the person when you're speaking. But if you do a lot of this stuff and like that, it's very negative, and you're not going to get good results. But I'm kind of nervous here. I don't know anyone about. What about you? Palms up, palms out, palms this. One thing that women will do is they'll do the false palm instead of doing this or doing this. What they'll do is they'll start with this and then this, like that. And what that is it makes you think that they're into you, but they're not. And part of it, I'll touch on that later. Well, I guess I touch on it now, but one thing I think a lot of guys have a hard time and understand about how women flirt is women always want you to have a positive impression of them. And it probably goes back to our hunter-gatherer days, because women are physically less powerful than men. And if you're in a tribe and you alienate a bunch of guys by rejecting them in a cold, hard way, they'll have a grudge against you and they could hurt you. And not only that, they could not be there in a time of need. You still need them as friends. So a lot of times when women reject a guy, they don't do it in a very straightforward way. And like I'm sure all of you have heard the cliche example, you want to go on a date with me this Friday night? Oh, I can't. I got to wash my hair. So it sounds like they're saying, I would do it, but only if I can't. I'm sorry, I can't because of this. I would, but I can't. Instead of saying, no, you're not worthy. And that's when you want to look out for that when you ask people out, is that usually women won't coldly reject you. They'll do it in a way it sounds like, I wish I could, but I can't because of A or B. When in reality, if they really like you, man, they'll work their schedule around you to make it work. And that's where you say stuff like, are you doing anything this weekend? And they just say, I'm busy. Oh, you're busy all weekend, really? But if they're really interested in, for example, you say, would you like to go out Friday night? Or that movie on Friday night looks really good. What do you think? oh, I'm busy. If they're really interested in you, they'll be like, I'm busy Friday night, but Saturday I don't know what to do, or I really want to see a movie tonight, or Sunday, or something like that. They'll find a way to make it work. But they're always finding excuses. I tell my friends, one of my INFP friends, it's like when you ask someone out and they tell you no, or they don't tell you no, they give you an excuse. You do it once or twice, and that's it, and you move on. And don't make a big deal out of it. Just don't offer it. Just like if you're asking a guy friend to hang out with you. You want to go get a beer? No, I'm busy tonight. You want to get, and that, when the week goes by, how about a beer on Sunday? No, I got too much. Okay, then that's it. You let it drop. You don't try to accommodate them. They should accommodate you. They should give you a counter offer for that. I know it's confusing, but that's part of the intuition. It's very ritualized, and that's where intuitive people usually have a harder time with it. But if you're ideally, you should look for another intuitive type. But yeah. One thing I found too is how INTJs show interest. A lot of people just doesn't register with them, and how we show interest in someone. If you're watching this video to see how algebraically trying to figure out how INTJs are looking for a partner. So INTJs, how they show interest in people is they analyze things, they try to figure them out, try to understand them, try to figure out as much as they can, they try to be useful to that person. So when you do that, you're engaged in a very cold-hearted, logical, analytical side to your brain, and most people do not interpret that as romantic interest. So I know you may find someone who's interesting or attractive, but you still want to put your cards on the table and show them that you're interested in them in a romantic way, not in a logical way. And you can do that with the flirting way or all the areas mentioned, but you don't want to hold that on forever, because if you could do it at the beginning, but if you keep doing that for too long, women will interpret that as disinterest. And I've had that happen way too often. A lot of times that's why we get accused of moving very slowly. We're not moving slowly, we're just trying to make sure that's a good fit they're a good fit for me and I'm a good fit for them. We don't want to waste our time, we don't want to hurt any feelings. But you still want to announce that you're romantically interested in them, even if you go slow. You don't have to go fast. When I was younger, I went way too slow. And as I got older, I learned to go fast, but I should have learned to be more comfortable going slow, just letting them know. And it took me a while to figure that out. Hopefully you do much better than I did. How do you flirt with your body language? A good way is you can test the waters. You can do it like you can do the flirting language, like you can mimic what they do that with the palms, but also how space is. So if you're sitting with someone, you can just briefly go in their space. You reach across, touch their hand if you want, or you get close to their body space, like lean in. And if they pull away, they're not interested. I've had that happen a lot. But I'm thankful because it's a very clear indicator. I didn't make an offer. They didn't make an offer. It's like I went to the store to buy the watch, and the moment I went to the counter, they pulled it away. Great. No, that's one of those things. No one else in the tribe knows the ranking. They didn't really. Most people wouldn't been the wiser. So I'm grateful for that kind of stuff. But that's one way you can do it. You can get in their space a little bit and don't make it awkward. But I mean, you just kind of you're talking to them. Hey, I think that's a great idea, and that's fine. You could touch them in the same way you could touch a guy. And if you reach over and make it for emphasis, I do this a lot. It's amazing, the magnetic, when you touch people. But you're talking, and you're saying now, I don't like to be touched or don't touch. Well, it's a tool you can use, and if you be comfortable with it, you can do it. And you start by touching their wrist, and you're looking great today, or that. I don't know many people could look as good in yellow as you do. And when you're touching the wrist, you can make it linger just a little bit, like a half second longer than what you would normally. And if you're getting a real good point, you can even leave it on there longer. But when you talk about physical touch, you do want to touch early and touch often, but you don't want to touch anywhere you wouldn't touch a friend initially, because it's a little too forward, a little too fast. But there's plenty of safe places you can touch on a person, the same way you touch a dude. And you touch them on the shoulder, like that. And if they pull away or they kind of stiffen up, they're like this, and you touch them on the shoulder, they didn't like it. And that's where you don't know if they're just not comfortable with touch or they just didn't like you. But that's where you do similar things in different ways. But generally, going back to the like lame excuses like washing their hair, there's if they're really interested in you, they'll find a way to make it happen. They will never just tell you flat out no. They'll never tell you, well, they might say yes. But usually they'll just say, no, you're not attractive, no thank you. They'll probably say, I would like to do it, but... And you want to match their energy. And what I mean by that is, if you ask them out, you've already done the lion's share of the work, and they're just at 20%, I don't know, let me think about it. They're not matching your energy. And you notice that. And next time you talk to them and you give them an offer and you want to match it. But if they're really going the extra mile to make it happen, you meet them there. But you never want to overcompensate. Like, I really want to it'd be great to have a cup of coffee with you and talk to you about this. Well, I don't know, this busy, I'm really swamped. So you're giving 80% and they're giving 10%. And if only I would increase my effort by 90%. I tell you what, I'll show up to your work and I'll be waiting outside for you to come out, and it'll be really convenient for you. I heard of one guy, a girl was not interested in him, and she said, only time I'm free is at 6 o'clock in the morning, right before work. And you know what? He showed up, he was there. But she was giving him a false offer. She did not expect him to accept the offer of showing up for coffee at that early in the morning. So that's what I'm talking about. That's what I told my INFP friend, is you want to match their energy level. You want to chase them, but not too much, not like that. That's hard to understand, but it's one of those ritualistic things, and we're never going to have a mastery of it. But I mean, just being familiar how it affects your dating, is that flirting and body language and all that is socially derived and ritualistically, so it's never going to click, but you can approach it from an analytical standpoint and read more about the subject or watch videos like this one. So logic. Yeah, fortunately, I mean, if you're a guy, society usually expects you to be more logical, so you'll come across as more masculine if you're logical, so you don't have to really change it, but you need to be aware of how it affects you as a dating prospect. Emotion has value, and you want to be more comfortable with that. I know it sounds obvious from a romantic standpoint, but emotion lets you have hope and motivation, because if you're just logical, you'd just be a nihilistic person just sitting in the corner. What's the point of everything? We're all going to die someday, or the universe is going to die a cold death, and we're all going to turn to dust. What's the point of it all? Emotion, irrational hope, that you motivate you to do things that don't make sense. And logic is one of those good things that's great when you have all the facts or most of them, but when you don't have hardly any of the facts, emotion really helps. And let me tell you, you don't have all the facts when it comes to dating. You never do. It's much more like poker than like chess. So that's where you have to bluff, and you have to take chances, and you have to bet everything to get what you want. So that's the benefit of embracing your emotions. And if you're willing to let yourself fall in love with someone instead of just being logical and standoffish, it's reciprocal. That's like one of the easiest ways you can be charismatic to people, actually, is just look for something good in them and focus on that. So if some person walks up to you and they have great hair, you just think, yeah, I really like his hair, or he has a great personality or his voice. You focus on that, although other things about his personality you may not like. Same thing with women and people. It might not be hard for you to focus on a woman if she's attractive, but it's that's a real secret, easy way to be charismatic with lots of people, is focus on what you admire about them instead of what you don't. And then being INTJs, we tend to find weaknesses, and you want to try to avoid that in everyone you talk to, and especially romantic interests. But that's a real good way to be charismatic. And if you use too much logic, it's not going to be easy for you. So you got to turn that off, or at least and embrace the emotion a little bit. One thing I've learned too, using logic, is INTJs in particular, we're really good at bursting people's bubbles. By that, I mean we're trying to help, but people will come up with a plan. Like, for example, I just recently read the book Lonesome Dove. I'm not big in the Western genre, but it's considered a classic, and it's a lot about love and forlorn love, and love never reciprocated, and it's interesting. But in it, there's a character in the book, and she lives in this dirty, dusty town, and she's beautiful and charismatic and intelligent, and the only thing she wants to do is she wants to move to San Francisco. and that's what her plan is. And she goes from partner to partner until the guy can provide that. And I'm thinking, as an analytical INTJ, I analyze her plan. She wants to go to San Francisco. Why does she want to go to San Francisco? Why not Chicago or New York? Because she knows Chicago and New York is so much easier, and it would have much more civilization that she's looking for. But she doesn't want to go those because she knows the negatives as well as the positives there. There are known variables. It's kind of like that grass is greener on the other side. She already knows what New York and Chicago are like. She knows all the negatives with the positives. But San Francisco is an unknown thing. It was the frontier in those days. And she doesn't know any of the negatives. And I'm thinking, even if I were to get her to, if I was in that situation, if I were to get her to go to San Francisco, she would just leave me for someone else who's better than me. That's what I think. So I'm automatically, if I were to vocalize this to her, I'd burst her bubble and that would just deflate her and she'd lose all interest in it. That's it, in a conversation. As a better way to enable your analytical abilities is finding ways for it not to work, is finding ways for it to work. So knowing the history, I know there's a couple ways. You can go across with a caravan, a group of people. I don't know what the time period, but trains sooner or later. Also, you could take a ship around South America. That's what some people did. But instead of popping bubbles, you can enable people, and that's a really powerful way to get people on your side. In the book, coincidentally, she ends up hooking up with a guy who was the opposite of what we are. He was one of these people that didn't care about how getting things done and understanding things. He would just tell people what they wanted to hear. And, lo and behold, she fell for him hook, line, and sinker. And as you read the book, he was a really bad choice for her. She suffered a great deal because of it. But it does serve as an example. You try to resist popping people's bubbles, whatever they are. Try to enable them, empower them instead of popping them and tearing them down. Whatever it is, whether it's their view of society, religion. If they think the world works a certain way and it's idealistic and it doesn't make sense, don't point out why they're wrong. And say, if they think everyone's a good person, show them ways that this could be true and make the world a better place instead of trying to make it worse. Or just show them how bad the world is. It's irrational, yes, but it is useful. As far as the next letter, J, the last one. When you talk to people, I found J types, they tend to ask closed-ended questions instead of open-ended questions. And that's just a good thing when you date, ask open-ended questions, because if you meet someone you're attracted to, the odds of the first sentence or two coming out of your mouth establishing a link, if it's a yes or no, binary, black and white. Do you like Lamborghinis? Yes or no. Do you like apple pie? Yes or no. I'm exaggerating to prove my point, but those are very closed-ended questions, and you want to, instead of don't ask, what kind of work do you do? Because everybody's going to have an answer, and the odds of what they do and what you like coinciding are not very likely. Instead, you want to ask questions that open them up. So instead of asking what kind of work do they do, ask what motivates them. What really gives you a sense of purpose? How do you want the world to be better? Or what kind of contribution do you give in your job? Or what are the things you like about your job? And that usually helps to open people up instead of closing them off with yes or no questions. I personally hate questions about work because it's, as Americans, we tend to, our work defines who we are, and I really hate that. So you can ask questions like, what kind of hobbies do you live for? And what do you do for fun? That's much better than saying, do you like rock climbing? I've gone to speed datings, and God, it's horrible. You hear people like, do you like this? Do you like that? Do you like rock concerts? So, yeah, you want to avoid that, and that's being less critical. But generally, yeah, you want to be less critical. That's kind of going back to what I said earlier about not bursting bubbles. Just a little more open-minded. But, and, in all honesty, women tend to like it when you're able to plan things. So when you go on a date, for example, you can have a plan of what you want to do. You want to have some flexibility. Usually, as INTJs, we're pretty open. We have a plan A, B, C, and D. Contingency D.5 in case this. But you do want to have a plan. You don't want to just say, what do you want to do? What do you want to do this? Instead of, you could, one good trick I've heard is when you take a girl on a date, they ask, where are we going? And you say, guess. And if they don't know, or you say guess, and then they guess a Mexican, or you take them to a Mexican restaurant. If they say Chinese, you go to a Chinese restaurant. It's a good little trick. But yeah, I mean, that's where having a plan, usually when you go on a date with a woman, the woman doesn't want to take charge and do things. Most women. But I've dated a few actually that have been like that. But yeah, generally. So that's where your strong suit of being a planner is going to really help. You just want your plan to have some wiggle room. And you can't get frustrated if the person doesn't want to play by the plan. If it feels too much like you're commanding them and orchestrating them, they're a pawn in your game, and it's going to be very unromantic very soon. But I mean, yeah, planning things is actually pretty good. So just some general advice after all this. We finished with all the letters. As for online dating, don't do it. Online dating is not about teaching people to date. Or helping people to date. It's about data farming. That's why it's free. And I think it was Zuckerberg said that if you don't know what the product is, you're the product. And so, like with all the online dating ones, they are not designed to get people, and the mechanisms are horrible. And usually, if you're a guy, the guy-girl ratio is you're usually 10 to 1 girl, 10 guys to 1 girl. And not only that, I mean, we're not, as a species, we're not meant to date in a way that we shop for things on Amazon. It's not a healthy way to do it. So don't. You could do speed dating, for example, or just making social circles grow bigger, making friends of friends, that sort of thing. That's what I'd recommend. I think I mentioned this earlier. Waiting too long in the evaluation stage. If you find someone attractive and you're trying to figure them out, you want to let them know you're romantically interested in them. And you can do it like a way I said, be vulnerable. You find someone attractive, instead of waiting weeks or days to figure out if they're a good fit for you or them. You could, after the first or second date, and I was like, I'm risking a lot being rejected, but I think you're wonderful. I'm really starting to feel things for you. I can see a future with you, instead of trying to probe and analyze and figure them out. That doesn't always carry you all the way. Some people like it, but some people don't. But for most people, I think it's going to help you out. Another thing too I see on the with online dating sphere, the man sphere stuff, is you see a lot of critiques of the other side, how women date, how they go about things. I don't think it's a really healthy way to go about it, because I mean, both genders have really problems about how they date. It's very irrational, very illogical, and actually kind of counterproductive how both genders go about dating. But instead of pointing them out and saying this is bad or this is irrational, get more success, though it may be true, you're not going to be helping the situation. And it doesn't matter if you can talk until you're blue in the face to try to convince people that they're doing things wrong or they're making mistakes, but they're not going to change their mind. You may be able to sway one person, but the world's a pretty big place. You're not going to convince everyone. The only thing you have control over is yourself. And you can try to make yourself the best kind of person you want to be. Be the person that you would want to date. If you want someone who's physically fit, be physically fit yourself. If you want someone who's charming and warm and charismatic, invest some skill points into charisma, or learn how to talk to people, learn how to engage people. So, yeah, don't try to fix the other side. Try to work on yourself, because that's all you have control over. Also, learn how to take rejection. A lot of times, women will reject you. I've had a lot of dates with women. They've rejected me, then later on, like a year or a few months later, ask them out again, just on a whim, and they're like, yes. But if you ask them out and you're mean to them, or you spread rumors about them, or talk bad about them, or she's so stuck up, or you try to argue with them and convince them, it's not going to leave a good taste in their mouth. So you're going to learn how to take rejection with ease, just like if you're asking a guy friend to go hang out with you. Just, all right, fine. And another thing too is, like, women talk to each other. And if you ask this woman out and she rejects you, and you're very harsh, or you're just analytical, or trying to say you're not making sense, or let me try to convince you, and you just don't get the hint, she's going to tell her friends, and her friends are going to tell her, and then you're going to have a reputation. And your reputation is that you're a doofus, and you don't know what you're doing, and you don't know your market value, and they're going to automatically take you down a notch. So that's where you want to lose gracefully, if that makes sense. Um, Another side thing is I found that women tend to like it if you're really good at something, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, ideally, you'd be good at something you can make money off of. But even if you're just good at something like juggling, if you're one of the best jugglers out there, they're going to be impressed, and it's going to actually work. And to me, I'm good at some things, but to me, I think they're really nerdy and dorky. So I used to hide it from talking to people, but I stopped doing that. I mean, I'd tell people, yeah, I'm into this nerdy hobby, but you know what? I'm really good at it. And you'd be surprised how many people like that. So, yeah, so just because you're into something that is dorky, you're not considered normal, don't try to hide it. I mean, you don't have to put it front and center like it's the only thing you got going on, but you don't have to hide it. You don't have to masquerade it. You don't have to do the popular hobby that everyone else is doing. An example would be like, I'm really into history. I love history. I mean, I tell people, and sometimes they like it and sometimes they don't, and then it starts a conversation. If they don't like it, that's it. But if I really have some credentials in history and I'm really knowledgeable, they still respect it and they do like it. I think I touched on this earlier, is to be the kind of person you want to date instead of trying to fix the other person. So try to be the best version of yourself. Try to take care of yourself physically, your grooming, your clothes, because that's stuff you can actually fix. A lot of these things in life you can't do much about. Like if you're short, am I short? You don't know. I could be 2 feet tall. You can't tell on the YouTube channel. But yeah, like if you're short, for example, that's one of the few things that's really unfair. I'll address this. It's one of the physical things about a guy that he can do nothing about. It does no indicator of value your worth in a modern society. Women are very harsh about that. And it's a shame, but that's how it usually is. Usually women want to date guys that are taller than themselves. There's not much you can do about it. But instead of trying to argue with women or saying they're shallow or egotistical, guys have things about them too. They're very shallow about what they look for in women. So you wouldn't take that all with a grain of salt. It's something you can't affect about yourself, but you can strengthen your other areas of your life. You can work out really well. You become very well read and educated. Look good and dress sharp. Learn some good jokes, that kind of thing. But just because you have something about you can't help. I got things about me I don't really like. There's not much I can do about it, but I can work on the other areas, and that's going to give you confidence that where it doesn't matter. So everybody's got something about themselves they can't change. If they would change it, but instead of lamenting it, wallowing on it, bringing it up in conversation, don't bring it up. Just work on other areas of your life that you can change. And most people won't listen to this advice, but usually when you first start dating someone, you got physical attraction and carry you through, and it's kind of the honeymoon phase. After the honeymoon phase, that's where your personality matters. And looks get you a date, but personalities get you the relationship. So that's where you want to look for people's personalities. So on that note, you can a lot of good things for personality that you're going to look for. Now, Myers-Briggs is great, and you can look for that when you size people up. And if you guys want, I'll make a video about how you size people up when you talk to them, how you categorize them. But a much better indicator from a psychology standpoint is the Big Five personality profiler. Now, you can look that up online at your leisure. But basically, I'll go over briefly. Openness to a new experience. That's how if you're inventive or curious versus being consistent and cautious. That's a good indicator of what you may like or not like. Being conscious of how you spend your time and yourself. If you're efficient and organized, we're pretty efficient and organized, or very extravagant and careless. Those are things you can look for in personality. It indicates, and if you've had a person you liked and they have these traits, you can look for it in the future. Extroversion, introversion, that's pretty obvious. We deal a lot with that. Agreeableness. That's one thing. I think J types tend to be less agreeable, but that's one thing you can make it look for too. Generally, agreeableness. Agreeable people are easy to get along with. Disagreeable ones are harder to get along with. It's either their way or the highway. But you can at least look for that. And neuroticism, What neuroticism is, just simply put, so if you have 5 things happen to you one day and they're good things, and you have one bad thing, you're focusing on the bad thing. 5 things don't matter. 5 good things don't matter. So that's one thing you look for when you talk to people. And usually all these categories, no one's perfect, but being conscious of it, you know what you're getting into. And when you talk to people, you can pay attention to what they say. Usually they'll tell you what they're about pretty quickly, and the words they choose and how they categorize things. Just general advice too, like kind of touching on if you have some trait about you don't like, that you can't help. You can't really control what happens to you, but you can control your reaction. So if you ask someone out and they're just totally rude to you, you can't really control what they did to you, but you can control your reaction. Now, if you're petty and revengeful, it's going to come back on you. But if you just kind of ignore it and let it slide, you come off way more cool. As an introvert or as an INTJ, you're probably going to come off across like that more often than not. So that's a good thing. Lastly, I haven't even covered this yet. You probably want to study attachment theory. That's a very good indicator. Basically, there's 3 types. There's some subtypes, but there's 3 main types: avoidant, anxious, and secure. If you're healthy and normal, it's usually secure. And the 2 ones you may encounter are avoidant and anxious. Secure ones are going to be no problem. But as an INTJ, you may come across as avoidant. I've triggered that a lot in anxious people, and anxious people have found me because of that you can come across as avoidant because they're so distant and hard to read. So you want probably familiarize yourself with the terms and how they affect the dynamic, because an avoidant person will run away from a relationship and the anxious person will chase after them, and it's a very toxic cycle. So understanding that, because I had one of my last girlfriends, she was anxious, and it triggered that in her. And now, knowing what I know now, I could have handled it much better than what I did. So that's something you want to be conscious of. Another thing when you're dating people, younger me didn't know this, but older me, is you want to pay attention to core values, things that like deal breakers and core values. The core values are like what you believe in is in society, what you value. I value intelligence, understanding. I value compassion and caring and sensitivity. And you want to be conscious of what their core values are. So I've dated some women that have been very, very religious, and they didn't tell me. And of course, it didn't work until several dates in. And then, if you really are interested, if these are deal breakers and core values, like a deal breaker, they can't smoke. You want to ask and find that out pretty quick. You don't want to beat around the bush. You don't want to waste 2 or 3 dates and realize, oh, this guy is into drugs. This isn't going to work. If they have kids or not, if you're into that, or if they're allergic to dogs, you kind of want to figure that. They're allergic to dogs, and you have 3 dogs. You want to find this out pretty quickly. So, yeah, that when you get older, usually you find out what your deal breakers are. When you're in your early 20s, you don't have deal breakers because you haven't found them. You find them by trial and error. But that's where you want to usually. That's what's so sad about dating when you're older, is it's like an interrogation. They just say, they're going off a list. Do you this? Are you this? Are you this? What's your blood type? And they're just looking for the deal breakers that they found in their own life. It can be kind of counterproductive because usually there aren't deal breakers. Sometimes people have unusually high criteria what they're looking for, and it's not very productive. That's a whole other conversation. Another thing you want to look up or read more into is love language. And what that is I didn't put the notes what they all are, but there's ways we express affection. It's either physical touch, gifts, quality time spent with them, words of affection, etc. And you can look this up, but you want to be conscious of what resonates with you more and what resonates with your prospective partner. With me, it's like I'm really big on touch, oddly enough, being an INTJ. Maybe that's why I talked about touch earlier in the video. But like when I'm with a partner, for example, touch is a really big deal for me because it's so much harder to lie, but it's so much easier to lie with words. So I don't really put much value in words. But I've dated women that words mean I'm odd. Just saying I love you enough, it can make their day, and I have to adapt to that. I've dated women that get the gestures, and one girl I dated, I go on a jog and I come back and I scoop up a flower I found and I would give it to her, and I just blew her away. I did that for another girl. She could care less. So some women like that, and I've had women want me to bring home flowers and chocolates, and some women could care less about that stuff. So that's the kind of things you want to look for. How do you express affection and how they are looking to receive it? Most people are oblivious to it, but you should read more about love language. Lastly, I did a whole video explaining intuition and sensing and all that, but you do want to look for another, if you're an INTJ, you want to look for another intuitive type. That will save you a lot of headache and heartache, trust me. I've dated plenty of sensing types, and it's hard, because you never are on the same page, and it's like you guys are talking a different language. So, and the short of it is that intuitive types, there's two kinds really, analytical and idealists. So analyticals are going to be just like you, and you're going to connect with them easy, and they're going to seem just like you, no problem. Whether they're extroverted or not, open-minded or judgmental, doesn't really matter. They're not going to vary that much. If they're extroverted, they're not going to want to shut up. That's the difference. But idealists, that's something you may not, that caught me off guard originally, is that idealists, they tend to be either look for how the society could be better or how individuals could be better, or look for improvement. But yeah, I mean, once you understand, intuition is a very slippery thing. Lots of connotations that go along with it. But you want to look for people that are intuitive types. The short thing is to look for the NF or NT in their name if you know it. Most people aren't going to know it though. But you can look for that. About general types that work well, I have a theory that you take your letters and reverse all of them except for N, intuition, and you'll find a pretty good, one of the best pairings. So with INTJs, ENFPs are very good. They're strong in a lot of areas, they're weak, but yet we have the intuition combination. And if you don't believe me, you just Google it. It's all over the internet. It's pretty. It's a meme farm. There's lots of stuff out there. It's a weird because it comes from an area you're not expecting, and yeah. So that's. You come from a kind of person you wouldn't expect would like you, and you like them. Also, any other intuition type. So INFPs are very similar, and you can get along with them very well. INFJs, I've had a lot of experience with those, and we get along very well too, because we both have that great sense of depth. But a lot of times you can either be on the same page or you're not, and that's where you gotta, since neither one of you is extroverted, one of you is going to learn how to talk and reach out to the other. So with the ENFP, for example, the extroverted person, they usually go to the introverted type, and that's where they usually, something happens. Either the date starts, or if they're in a relationship, if one person gets their feelings hurt, they'll reach out and find out. But if you're both introverted, you could both go your separate ways. And that's something, as I've gotten older and more mature, I've learned how I have to reach out and I have to talk if I'm dating an introverted person. Because a lot of times with INFPs or INFJs is they'll get this building up tension and they won't say what's wrong, and then it'll explode like a volcano. But generally speaking, yeah, any intuitive type is going to really help, and they all have different kinds of flavors and styles to them. ENTPs tend to be very argumentative, but most extrovert types, they might rub you the wrong way, but at least they'll reach out and talk to you, and you won't have a hard time. Extroverts are easier to read. Introverts are harder to read. Put it that way. Enough said. Yeah, I was going to say ENFPs, it's kind of like catnip with them. They're magically drawn to our types. You probably already have an ENFP friend, you just don't know it. Probably ENFPs watching this video right now, trying to figure this out algebraically, like I said earlier. Except, I mean, when you're an INTJ, we like to think of ourselves as like this magic unicorn. Don't be that guy who goes up to the forum board and say, "Hello, ENFPs. I'm your magical INTJ." Don't act like that. First off, they don't like to be found. They like to find you. If they're introverted types, you have to find them. But extroverted types, no. But don't treat yourself like you're some kind of magic unicorn just because you're one of the more rare types. Most people aren't going to care. But the ones who do tend to be intuitive types, and they'll appreciate you. So that's where you want to look for, be able to gauge, size people up and on site. I think my intuition video, I'll talk about that. But if you guys want me to elaborate on this or anything in the future, like if you watch this far into the video or listen to this far in the video, I am obligated to do a video on it if you ask me to. But what else? And P and J types. It's really not that big, but either you're on their side or you're not, and it's kind of hard sometimes if they're not on the same page as you. It kind of burns a bridge. I've had plenty of critical types that are emotional that I've connected with, so it can be done. But you just got to be more graceful. That's so not so callous, but sensitivity. But yeah, actually I made it all the way through the video. Well, yeah, you guys, thanks for watching this video, and hopefully you find it helpful to you. I don't always find time to make these videos. It's not like I'm being spurious or being irrelevant, but I'm just having fun playing video games, and I'm actually dating myself, and I had a good time at it. So yeah, I apologize if you miss my videos or if you want more, but don't hesitate. You can comment on the videos. I'll try to either acknowledge it, or if it's good, if I get enough people asking, I'll make a video about it, either more about body language or more about INTJ stuff. But yeah, sometimes my life just keeps me really busy having fun. But yeah, now that's winter, and I can't get on my motorcycle, ride around, or go jog as much. There's not as much to do. But as always, thanks for watching, and best of luck to you guys. Until next time.